There are several key pieces to this jigsaw as I see it anyway. There's the evolutionary perspective, there's the mechanisms that seem to exist, there's the split brain data, what each side of the brain does, and the fact that we're locked into looking at these problems with one side of our brain, yet the data on that side of the brain suggests maybe it's not something we should be trusting too much. Then beyond that, we have these accounts and traditions that have come down to us. And not only do they talk about this degenerative condition and this loss of function, this slide into delusion, but they also come with a bunch of techniques or practices, as we tend to call them. I like to think of them as treatments. You strip away the belief, you strip away the dogma, and just look at it in very simplistic fashion. What were all these approaches doing? What were these treatments doing? You can use them as a kind of diagnostic toolbox, kind of reverse engineer them. Okay, why do we need to meditate? What would that do? What would yoga do? Why would the shamanic tradition come up with various cocktails of neuroactive chemicals? What does that suggest? Maybe some neurochemical deficiency, and so on and so on. So when you lay them all out, I'd say they kind of fit into three fairly easy categories. One of them would be a kind of a rebuild, rebuilding our whole physiology with particular focus on a neural system. We know it's the most complex thing we know. It's incredibly delicate, incredibly complex, and in recent times we've built it from the most terrible materials we could have imagined. So really a basic rebuild, which takes a while. In addition to that, we have treatments that will try to reduce the influence of the left hemisphere, inhibit its activity, reduce its influence on our state of consciousness. And then hand in hand with that, we have techniques that can stimulate the right hemisphere. So, the classic ones would be neurochemical augmentation, using analogues or similar chemicals that our neural system can respond to, particularly the right hemisphere, which, if our origins were symbiotic, it must have evolved to run on complex biochemistry. If the neocortex came out of the forest, then the forest biochemistry was its operating system. The idea that we can run on our own autonomous neurochemistry is a misnomer. That's a basic mammalian neurochemical formula. Our neocortex and the neocortex of the hominids and some of the great apes evolved to run on this incredibly complex formula. So putting some of that back and/or some analogues that can stimulate it. So three basic categories: rebuild, inhibit the left, stimulate the right. And many of those traditions survive in kind of modified form, often on isolated strands. Some people get very interested in diet. That's as far as it goes. A lot of people will meditate or do yoga. Some people get interested in the shamanic tradition and take psychedelics. You start putting all these things together, rebuild, start assimilating this very complex biochemistry. You start using techniques to dampen down the effects of the left hemisphere, hand in hand with techniques to stimulate the right. And you can get radically different results in a very short time.